Hi there, this is Joanna Interview again, and with me is for the third time Jason Kelly Thompson. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes, so today now we're gonna talk about practical instructions, how we can do work, our personal work with ourselves. Can you give us tips how to work with ourselves on the psychogenealogy?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you for having me for part three.
You're very
So
welcome.
at the end of part three, kind of occurred to me to say to people that as they're listening to the interview, as I'm talking, their mind is listening, their brain. Well, I'll say this to the people: as you're listening to me, your mind is listening, your brain is listening, and your subconscious mind is listening. So the conflicts that we're looking for are in the subconscious mind. So as the words go in, listening to these interviews on YouTube, the information is going in, touching programs, invisible loyalties with your ancestors, something that's creating a block in your life or something that's creating something positive, because not only do we receive blocks from our ancestors, we also receive blessings. So the information is bubbling up to the surface to become conscious. So if this method is attracting you, if you're interested in doing this kind of work, then what I suggest is to start getting the information together that you have. You want to know the names and the dates for your brothers and sisters, your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents, and your great great grandparents. The system that I use is with 28 ancestors, because I find that for most people, the main conflicts that are affecting people are from one of these 28 ancestors, usually from one or two great grandparents and from one or two great great grandparents. So, obviously a lot of people don't have that information.
Mm-hmm.
But when we do this process, which is called opening your tree, you start to open your tree and the energy of the tree starts to move. Many times people will take my class and they'll say, 2 months later, my cousin called me and she said, she just started working on the tree and found all this information. Would I like to know? And it was like her cousin didn't know that she was working on her tree. So the energy, when we start looking at the tree, the energy goes out and touching all the people in the tree and affects many people at the same time, because we're all connected. And that's, of course, what Jung called synchronicity. I
Mm-hmm.
was teaching a class in San Diego, and this man I had decoded had a session with him the year before, and his grandfather was adopted. And he said he had no information, there was no way to find information. And I said, well, we work with the information that you have, because the information is always enough. So he's taking my Psychogenealogy II class in San Diego, and he raises his hand. He said, I needed to say something. I said, okay. He said, I'm receiving text messages from my sisters that they're cleaning out one of our relatives' attics, and they found the adoption certificates for our grandfather with the name of the biological parents and all the information that you were asking me about. And his sisters didn't even know that he was looking at the tree. So
Wow.
they were just taking pictures and sending it to all the people in the family, and it's happened to be arriving in his cell phone while he's taking my class. So there are lots of synchronistic stories about that, how it happened. So the tree is participating in this process. So what people want to do, there's a diagram that I use of triangles and circles to represent the people, and I can send you that by email. And then I don't know, you can put a link on your YouTube. I'm not sure how all that technology works, but it's
Yeah,
it's
I
in.
can
Oh,
I can figure that out. I can
okay,
download it in a PDF and to website. Yeah.
great.
Mm-hmm.
And so what people want to do is to get a big poster board about 50 centimeters by 70 centimeters or something like that, 40 by 50, and put the information freehand on the poster board. And it's really important not to use a ruler. You know, some people are really perfectionistic and they want everything lined up and do it exactly right or whatever. But you want to do it freehand because it's an expression of your unconscious mind. So sometimes people will put a triangle for a circle, or sometimes there'll be space missing, or sometimes there'll be just like a bunch of noise up here in one part. And there are things like that that are getting our attention, to put our attention on that part of the tree because it's important for whatever it is the conflict is that the person is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the
The
practical
start.
thing. And there's today there's lots of information on the internet. So people can start out by putting the name. If the ancestor has a name or a last name that's a little different, it makes it a lot easier to find the information. But I have some students from Portugal or ancestors from Portugal, and they're in the process of putting all the church information on the internet. So, in Europe, hundreds of years ago, the births and marriages were all registered in the Catholic Church. So if people want to prove that they have Italian citizenship, or if they want to prove that they have Portuguese citizenship, they need to go to the church and get the documents and get copies and prove all that at the consulate or whatever. But now it's becoming more and more available on internet. And there's a website called Family Search that has a lot of information. The Mormon Church is very interested in genealogy. So, most people have a Mormon church nearby all around the world, and you can go to the Mormon church and ask for help, and they will get on the computer and give you the information about your ancestors. It's really quite amazing. I had a student in California who went to
Okay.
the Mormon library, and in one afternoon, she found all of her 28 ancestors, her 8 great grandparents, her 16 great great grandparents, and all of the birth dates and passing dates and all the information in one day.
And you don't have to be a part of Mormon
So
Church,
you
right?
don't need to be a member. They provide that service for anybody. So yeah, it's quite amazing. And and there are websites that you can join. They have a website. It's called ancestry.com. And you can join ancestry.com and create your tree on ancestry.com. And then you connect with lots of other people's trees and receive information from them. And if you don't want to pay every month, there's a monthly fee. If you don't want to pay every month, you can work on it for a month or two, cancel your membership, and your tree is always available for the rest of your life. It's on the internet. So, if next year you want to find some more information, you can pay for another month or two and join again and look for more information. But in the meantime, you can work on your tree and other people can see it. So, with the computers, it's amazing, what we can do today. So another thing that's really interesting is that the the Jews, we've been talking about Jewish people some before the interview and in the second interview too, were expelled from Portugal and Spain 500 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Portugal in the time of the Inquisition, and Portugal now is offering citizenship for the descendants of the Portuguese Jews who were expelled.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a symbolic act. It's repairing the damage that was done 500 years ago with the
Mm-hmm.
descendants of these people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really powerful when you meet the descendant of someone. Happens with people who survive from the concentration camp, or someone whose ancestor helped somebody who survived, and then they meet 50 years later to thank them for doing that. There was someone who was saved in the North Sea in a boating accident, and then they found the grandson of the person who saved their grandfather or great grandfather, and thank them for doing that. So these are all little symbolic acts that, that we can do. I had another client whose great grandmother ran away with another man and abandoned her husband and her children, and married the other man and had children with him. And 3 generations later, their descendants decided to get together and have a big picnic and heal all this family pain, because the children, the man who was abandoned, the children who abandoned, of course, suffered greatly. It was a huge, painful experience for them. And so they were able to come together. They have a picnic in August every year, and they were able to come together with the descendants of their ancestor, the two branches of family of this woman who had two husbands, and heal that energy of the pain of their ancestors.
Right, that's a powerful thing. I need to ask you here one question. When you talk about this tree of our past, are you referring, like when the person starts to search for it, are you also referring to cousins, or when your grandmother, grandfather, they had brothers and sisters? Because it's a lot, the former times, people had a lot of children. And do you focus on your grandfather and his parents, or you also take into account his brothers and sisters and cousins?
That's a great question. So when I created this class, actually what happened is that Enrique was teaching total biology in San Diego, and he asked me if I would be interested in teaching psychogenealogy in San Diego. Well, of course, I said yes. I mean, that's what I really wanted to do that. And I had left San Diego 25 years before that to move to Brazil. And Enrique didn't invite me to go to Chicago or New Orleans or Miami. He invited me to go to San Diego, which is exactly where I had lived 25 years ago, and I hadn't been back for 25 years. And so, in Uruguay, he invited me to go back to where I was before. It was a great healing for me to be able to go back there. But anyway, that's, of course, synchronicity. When I was creating this class, I had given workshops before, and what I realized in the workshops is that if I gave too much information, the brain kind of goes into overload, and then the person becomes confused and they don't understand anything. And so it's like we need to take a few steps back. Whoa, let's go take a few steps back and be more simple. So the course that I teach is 4 modules. And in the first module, what people do is look at their basic tree. So we put the person, their 2 parents, their 4 grandparents, their 8 great-great-grandparents, and their 16 great-great-grandparents. So we don't look at any siblings, just to make it simple. And when you start putting it on paper, it's easier to do it if you don't have all these other people on there. So then in module 2, we add the brothers and sisters, the aunts and uncles, the great aunts and uncles, and that gives us a lot more information. So that's the way I recommend that people do it, to start out being really simple.
Okay. I have one more question here, because I already heard, considering total biology in this tree, how, the past is influencing us and our ancestors. Some people mention, they use the word curse, that someone out of the family, but listen to that, there could be great tree, everybody were in harmony, but there was someone, let's say, powerful out of our family, maybe, I don't know, jealous woman.
I was kind of trying to avoid that. I was kind of trying to avoid that question in your first interview, and I was thinking about that this morning. Before you called, I was thinking, we never really talked about that, and I wonder if she's going to bring it up again. So Let me, before I forget, let me just please finish the story about Portugal, and then I'll see how I can answer that question.
Sure.
So the Portuguese people are offering citizenship for the descendants of the Jews who were expelled from Portugal. And a woman who took my class in July was looking at her tree, and she found out that she had Jewish ancestors in Portugal,
Hmm.
and that she actually is Jewish.
Hmm.
And she never knew that. And now, not only is she Jewish, she's also Portuguese because she has a Portuguese passport. And there's
Apparently.
a group of people in Brazil called, I can't remember the name in Portuguese, but anyways, it's the Brazilian descendants of Portuguese Jews, and they all have their Portuguese citizenship
Oh.
for being expelled. And so that's a big healing that Portugal is doing. It's a healing for the country. It's a healing for the Jewish community. It's a healing for the individual trees. It's a healing for the individual people. So, I mean, she is just really happy to be Jewish, and she had no idea. So, so yeah. So getting back to the other question, we have what's called blessings and curses, and actually the curses are very rare. So
Oh.
it's something that I don't even talk about in my classes. Um, what I would say is that, I mean, first of all, when we open a tree, we're going to open it with a specific healing intention. And so we were looking at the particular problem that the person might have. For example, I had a person who had cystic fibrosis, or actually her boyfriend had cystic fibrosis, and he was drowning in the fluid in his lungs.
Mm-hmm.
And so we looked at the tree, we opened the tree, and we found out that her ancestor drowned in a ferry boat accident, and her ancestor, her great grandfather, needed to be saved. So
Mm.
she was saving her fiance
Wow.
because she was saving a man who was drowning, symbolically saving this grandfather. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it's really beautiful. But anyway, so we opened the tree, and we may find some information about a curse, and usually the curse would come from some family story that somebody says, we heard, that there's a curse on this family, or, all these bad things happen and there must be a curse. And, maybe one of the ancestors did something really bad, murdered somebody, or murdered a village, or did some kind of murdered some Native American people or whatever, and then somebody put a curse on their descendants.
Mm.
So what we would do in that case is look for the specific symbolic act to heal that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the healing means to include the victims and also the perpetrators. I've been to a lot of family constellation workshops where Jewish people were doing a constellation, and the Nazis appear. They had a relative who died. There's a woman. I remember one in particular who had a woman who had a respiratory problem,
Mm.
and her ancestor was died in the gas chamber, asphyxiated. And
Yeah.
so her granddaughter or great granddaughter had lung problems. But anyway, in this constellation, the Nazis appeared. So it's like, one of the things that Hellinger says is one of the most powerful things that anybody can do is to take the life of another person. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the two most powerful things you can do is to give life to a baby or take the life away from a person.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who murder somebody it creates a connection, a bond with the family constellation or with the family tree or the soul of that person's family, and the assassin also becomes part of the family.
Ouch. That is
And
powerful.
so,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, and so of course, people usually, would not want to think about that, would not want to, they want that person to disappear. But, Hellinger said, that his work, he called his work the Orders of Love, that for love to flow in a family, everyone needs to be included. You can't
Mhm.
exclude anyone. So you can't exclude the assassin either.
Mhm.
So it's really painful to be able to do that, and it's really painful for the Jewish people to see a Nazi in the constellation. And if they exclude that person, then it can generate blocks in their lives and in the lives of their descendants.
Mhm.
So there's a really beautiful story about this man who created a reconciliation project in San Diego. And his grandson, who was like his son because he lived with his grandfather, um, was delivering pizza. He was around 16 years old, and a gang was out on the street that night, and part of the initiation into this gang was to
Mhm.
kill someone.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so, we know that nothing happens by chance, but by chance, the pizza delivery boy happened to be there, and they said, okay, it's your turn. And the person who was supposed to kill somebody killed this innocent young boy.
Mhm.
And so the murderer went to San Quentin, which is a big prison in California, and his grandfather started to visit him and created a relationship with the assassin.
Mm.
And uh, they came to a reconciliation. And when he created a foundation about reconciliation to help people reconcile in all different types of situations. And
Mhm.
so he gave him a job. And so when he came out of the prison, he went to work in the Reconciliation Foundation.
Oh.
And I mean, it moves me to even think about this. What a big person, what an amazing person this grandfather could be, would to go and be loving with the assassin of his grandson, who was really his son, and work together with him, and they travel around the country giving lectures about reconciliation. And obviously it's a very inspiring story for people to see
Yeah.
this reconciliation that can happen between two people, someone who
Mhm.
harmed a family and the people who survived. So yeah.
Mhm.
So if there's some family story about a curse, or if somebody knows about a curse or something like that, there's always a solution. One of the principles of psychogenealogy is that there's always a solution. So we
Mhm.
would look for some symbolic act, could be with either descendants of the person or completely symbolically, or to repair the damage. Sometimes the curse is because of something really bad that the person's ancestor actually did.
Mhm.
So in that case, then there needs to be some type of healing reparation to repair that damage symbolically, and then the love can continue to flow in that family again.
Mhm. Interesting. I just want to mention something because what you said about this relationship between the victim and oppressor to include him in our tree, it makes sense then for people who were abused in the past, because as the psychology says something about they call it Stockholm Syndrome, when there is this need in people to befriend your oppressor. So they go sometimes back in time to their childhood, and they almost want to, get friends with that person, try to stalk this person. They need something. So maybe it's not that crazy as some of the people would think about it. They need some sort of connection and solution. Subconsciously, they're seeking for the solution, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with people with Stockholm Syndrome, and the way I understand it, at least with the cases that I've worked with, is that the person's survival depends on that person. You know, in order to
Yeah.
survive, they need that person, and so that's why they become like brainwashed
Oh yeah, very
by.
much. Yes.
Yeah, it's like a brainwashing process. So they become brainwashed in order to be able to survive, and then it generates a bond with that person because in order to live, they need that person, and
Yeah.
it creates like a brainwashing, and so then they think that this is my savior. Actually, the perpetrator is the one who created the problem in the first place, but he also provided the solution. So
Mm-hmm.
in the brainwashing process, then it's like all they think about is the solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It is very
So
strong to the moment of even being ready to commit suicide. Very strong.
so one of the things, just to, you know, to finish up here, um, is that one of the things that was quite shocking for me in family constellation work was that Hellinger was not a fan of forgiveness. Because you know,
Ah,
from the time I started studying spiritual growth, or even from the time when I was a child in the church, you know, they always talk about um, forgiveness and how important it is to forgive. And what Hellinger said is that if you forgive the perpetrator, let's say, you know, someone, a child who was sexually abused, if they
mm-hmm.
forgive the perpetrator, then the guilt falls on the child, because
Oops.
the guilt has to fall somewhere. So
Yeah.
if they forgive and release the perpetrator, then the guilt falls on them. So it's important to give the responsibility back to the perpetrator. The perpetrator is the one who did the crime, and they're responsible for it, and they need to deal with it, and they need to pay the price for it, whatever that may be. And
Okay.
so, you know, it's important to let go of the resentment, is to let go of the anger, the hurt, and not release the not release the perpetrator. It's
Interesting.
quite an interesting concept. It took me a while to really kind of get used to that.
It's very strong, but I totally agree with that. I heard that many times already. It's not about forgiving. You cannot forget. You can work with yourself so it doesn't harm you anymore. But the energy somehow has to come to balance. So it's not up to you because, yeah, if you forgive, then it's okay to do it again, sort of, for this person. This person never learns anything. The murderer, they need to pay the price, pay the consequence of what happened. If not, then the energy is not balanced, then still something seeks the solution. Yeah, fantastic. Coming back shortly to this curse thing.
So, Joanna, excuse me, but you know, I need to finish up for part three. So, you know, we can talk some more about this in part four.
Fantastic.
But anyway, I'm really enjoying these interviews. I appreciate so much. The people say, yes, several people have said, "Oh boy, I really like her energy. You know, I want to meet her." So you're generating a lot of fans. You know, the person that I'm staying with in Brazil, sister lives in England, and she sent it to a bunch of people in England. So it's, you know, I said, well, she's a lot closer to Joanna than I am. It'll be easier for her to go over to Germany and visit her.
Oh my God, that's so nice to hear. We're gonna do it like that because I am very much inspired by you, by your work, by what you're telling me. And of course, I want to share, and it triggers more questions. But I already receive a lot of questions from people, so I would like to encourage even more questions. So maybe you can take at least some of them next time because these things are so interesting and people really need solutions. And sometimes um, there is no general recipe how to approach it. It's so, so vast, so complex, and people probably need to find their own creativity in the process. Yeah.
That's right. Well, maybe I'll do a workshop in Germany.
Fantastic, or through Skype, or we go to Uruguay, Brazil, San Diego, who knows?
My ancestors left Germany in 1710.
So you have ancestors.
So 300 years ago, they went to England and then the U.S. My mother's last name is Zimmerman.
Ah,
Zimmerman.
Zimmerman. That's the short name of my producer, House Music. I had the pleasure to cooperate with.
Well, it's great seeing you. I wish you all the best. And for all the people who are watching, all the best to all of you and healing for all of your trees.
Fantastic. So let's start with the tree. Seeing you next time. All the questions you have, direct to us, especially to Jason. Thank you very, very much. Have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you, Jason.
Take care.
You.
Bye-bye.